How you doing, brothers and sisters? This is your boy BC. Welcome back to another Based LDS video, and sorry for the time away. We had our weekend in Denver, which thankfully Julie got to the temple. Again, I could not get my recommend because the bad weather kept me from getting to Rapid City, but the weather cleared enough for us to get to Denver, and it's a minor miracle that it did because there were things we need to take care of as a family there that we were not aware we needed to take care of. And we're still working to see how things turn out. But for the moment, a miracle occurred, and we're grateful for that. And then we are rearranging our house to make room for my wife's burgeoning bath and beauty business. I look forward to perhaps plugging her product later on. Maybe I'll charge her $1. What do you think? Make some money off this endeavor. But I'm proud of her. I've already got some lip balm from her. It's great stuff. My lips are kissable again, according to her, so that's a good thing. And so we've got that taken care of. So now I'm going to be making some videos. And I've actually tried to do this a few times, and they keep coming out just too long. So I'm having to take a big meat cleaver to what I was wanting to do and just really trim it down. And so we're going to talk about Plato's Allegory of the Cave. And Plato was a philosopher a couple 300 years before Christ. And this is probably his most well-known teaching. And when we talk about the cave, and I'll show a video on this in a bit, one that unfortunately I had to borrow. I tried to make one and could not. But when we talk about the cave, many people take it to Plato demonstrating the need for a philosopher or a teacher to guide us through life. And I don't think that goes far enough. With Plato's allegory, you go much further than just a teacher or a philosopher. You go to something deeper. And I think he was looking for a prophet. I don't know that that's a name he would have used or how we've identified it, but I think had he met one, he would have realized that this is what he meant when he talked about coming out of the cave in his allegory. So we're going to talk about that. But I do want to set this up because the modern church today, the modern Christian church, does not believe in a need for prophets or apostles. Those things were done away with, they taught with Christ. The problem is the Bible makes no mention of that. And even after Christ's death, he appeared to the 11 remaining apostles and some of the other disciples and taught them for 40 days. And then he was lifted up, and he promised that after he was gone, then they would receive the Spirit and commandments through the Spirit. This is in Acts chapter 1. And then he instructs them. He leaves. They're just living their lives. They're fasting. They're praying. And they decide they need a 12th apostle. Why do this if Christ is the last? Why come up with another apostle? Why not just wait for them to die out and they just preach and there you go? But they need another apostle. And it's at this point that they appoint Matthias to the 12. And they'll appoint others. We know this because of them calling 70s and Paul. So we see that there's going to be a continued need for prophets and apostles. And that's something in the last video we talked about Justin recognizing that it was not enough to have a philosopher. You needed prophecy. You needed testimony, not rhetoric. But he was a philosopher first, and he thought he was philosophizing in a different way so as to be Christ-like. And while he was a great apologist and a very intelligent person, he was wrong in his approach because he just became one of the learned doctors that came to and would later help to reorganize and reform Christ's church. And I say that because it was slow, it was gradual, but you see knowledge being lost from the church. And you see the doctors and the teachers arguing, schisming, some factions, some could get along with each other, some could not. And you end up having a series of creeds issued to try and create a united and orthodox and Catholic body. And this lasted for a while, but eventually the impurities in the church grew, and you saw schisms from Luther onward in the church. And then you saw it break up into different sects and denominations. And then chaos and confusion. And now they kind of generally agree on things that guarantee salvation, but they have minor disagreements. But if you hold to a certain few basic tenets, you're going to be fine. And so it's because of this that they don't think we need a prophet. That's because of some of these later teachings that are not, in fact, non-biblical, right? So when we get into this, before we start the cave, I want to give a slight introduction. And Nibley's knocking out of the park for me with The World and the Prophets, which is volume 3 in his series. And I want to start off with a few words that he says. So, chapter 17, Prophets and Ritual, from The World and the Prophets, Hugh Nibley, volume 3, as you can tell, well worn. Let me see here. Take the present-day activities of Latter-day Saints. This is page 146. Genealogical research is not essential or even helpful to make a living. One can get along in the world without attending innumerable meetings, partaking of the sacrament, going to the temple, paying tithes, keeping the word of wisdom, and all that. In all these things we put ourselves out unnecessarily. Even sexual morality is not a prerequisite to survival and success in this world. A surprising number of people dispense with it. Why do we do all these things that don't need to be done? The usual explanation of religionists is that man has a natural urge to do such things as are required by religion. But if the urge were natural, everyone would have it, and this is far from the case. So you see, he moves on here. Bottom of page 147. When the folklorists and comparative religionists in the last century first noticed amazing parallels among the rituals and legends of people as widely scattered as Central Europe and celebs, they naturally assumed that this strange uniformity was produced by a natural urge common to all men to express their deepest desires and experiences in a few basic ritual patterns. The patterns, however, were altogether too elaborate, too peculiar, and too far removed from the dictates of any practical necessity to be explained in terms of a spontaneous and untutored invention. So he moves on here. For all that the religious rituals of the vast bulk of mankind might have been spontaneous and local in origin, the established fact is that they have not been. With this discovery, most of the armchair speculation about the primitive origins of religion has gone by the board, but we cannot discuss this now. Here it suffices to point out that the common theory that man engages in impractical and difficult religious activities simply because he has an urge to do so has been seriously challenged. For wherever men are found engaging in these activities, there is an historical tradition at hand to compel them. And if asked why they do these odd things, they will invariably reply that it is because their fathers did so before them. Where's that from? Divinely instituted rites and ordinances have to do in the first instance with things which men do for no other reason than that God has commanded them. They are, first of all, acts of faith and are meritorious as such. They must be hard enough and demanding enough not to become mere acts of dull, automatic repetition. And their immediate practical value may not be so obviously apparent that there is no room left in their performance for a real test of faith. When one goes to train with a master, not merely with the object of serving time for a certificate as in our modern character factories, but in order to learn all the master has to teach, and to become as far as possible perfect in an art, a science, or a craft, the first and all-important step is to establish a condition of complete trust between the master and the disciple. The candidate must by sure tests show his implicit faith and unhesitating obedience to every command in every situation. Soon enough, he will understand why he must take a seemingly absurd position or perform some apparently meaningless operation. But unless and until he does the thing, Until he does the thing and does it entirely on faith and does it with a will, he will never come to understand worlds without end. There are many things that can be explained only after they're done. Going on to the bottom of page 149, The human race lives as it were a double life. It pursues a double economy, a practical one and a religious one. The conflict between these two, the treasures of earth and the treasures of heaven, is frequently mentioned in the New Testament. Of these two lives, the religious one is obviously the real one. Otherwise, it would have been given up long ago. In every serious crisis, in every life and death situation, when men are brought face to face with reality, the so-called practical life is pushed completely out of the picture and religion springs to the fore, and the only reality after all. There it is, right? How often? What are we being told by these ministers? Christ has given us everything we need. Oh, we have His Word. It's complete in the Bible. The Bible is the last authority. Think of what the Jews were teaching at the time of Christ. We have the law, we have the temple. We need nothing else. We're just waiting on a Messiah who will come and overthrow the Romans and bring us back to political relevance. What are some well-meaning people in the world today, even in the church teaching? And I do mean in the general body of the church, not the leaders. That if there's a Christ, he's coming to overthrow the oppressor and bring equity to the world and establish peace. To remove systems of power that are no longer functional, that are immoral. That's oppression theology, right? What do the common Christian churches need? And all you need is the Bible. No prophet. If you read the Bible, God will fill you with His Spirit and you'll be led to do that which is right. And yet all the time those people do what is wrong. Now, they can make the claim against Revelation, but we'll never claim Revelation to be perfect. Because sometimes we invent Revelation. It takes a good amount of time to distinguish and realize what Revelation is and how it comes. Right? And so we learn. And this is where we come to the prophets. This is where we come to a necessity for the prophets. Because we are a world in confusion and in bondage to that confusion because of it. So let's look at Plato, shall we? And I have it muted. You know what? I'm going to unmute this and we're going to listen to their words and just follow along.
Of the analogy, and then look at the meaning and purpose in relation to Plato's theory of forms. Plato told an analogous story to illustrate his theory of forms. Imagine a group of prisoners chained since childhood in an underground cave. They are unable to move their heads, able to look forward only. Imagine that behind them is a fire burning up higher and at a distance, and between the fire and the prisoners a low wall has been built. There is a walkway where people are carrying various objects that rise above the wall, including human images and shapes of animals. The fire casts shadows of the figures and objects onto the wall in front of the prisoners. Plato argued that such prisoners would deem reality to be nothing else than the shadows of the artificial objects. One of the prisoners is freed from his shackles and compelled to stand up suddenly, to lift his eyes to the light, and in doing all this felt pain, as the brightness of the fire hurts his eyes, so that it is difficult to see the objects casting the shadows.
All right, I'm going to pause here for a minute. And let's jump ahead. These people that are chained since childhood and don't know anything other than what they see of the murky shadows on a wall. This is all that is real to them. This is all that they know. They have seen nothing else and know nothing else other than what is on this wall. I want to share with you a scripture from section 123 in the Doctrine and Covenants. It is an imperative duty that we owe to God, to angels, and to whom we shall be brought to stand, and also to ourselves, to our wives and children, those who have been made to bow down with grief, sorrow, and care under the most damning hand of murder, tyranny, and oppression, supported and urged on and upheld by the influence of that spirit which so strongly riveted the creeds of the fathers, who have inherited lies upon the hearts of the children and filled the world with confusion, and has been growing stronger and is now the very mainspring of all corruption, and the whole earth groans under the weight of its iniquity. It is an iron yoke. It is a strong band. They're the very handcuffs and chains and shackles and fetters of hell. That is these bonds. That's the shackles, the fetters, the hand of oppression. And this is the creeds of the fathers. This is the politics of today. This is the mainstream media of today. They're telling you what to think. They're telling you what is real. They're telling you what is important. And you just see it on here. You get the shadowy image of what is real, but these aren't real, are they? This isn't a real horse. This isn't a real pot. These are images of, and then you get the shadow of. And we're being convinced that this is real, that this is what we should know, that this is what we'd understand. And then we give these names, and we attach importance to these shadows. And as they interplay with each other, we give them meaning and story. That's the narrative. So let's continue on.
He is told that what he had seen before was all a cheat and an illusion, but that now he saw more truly. He is then dragged by force up the ascent.
Now, this is the man who's standing up, the man over here, to the far left. You just see his elbow in the screen. This is the man who's been freed from shackles, and he's been taught that everything he sees is an illusion. Can you think of a better term for a prophet? Think of all the great calls of prophets you've seen. They're directed to correct the people, to lead them from error to truth. That's what this person's being called to do. And you'll see he's being asked to rise to a level, to engage in a work. Enoch's called to a ministry. Moses to lead the people. Abraham to create a nation of believers, that he'll be the father of a great nation that will believe in the gospel will be preached to because of Abraham. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Samuel, you get the idea, all the Old Testament prophets. You get what was promised to the apostles in the New Testament. Why should anything be different? Think of how far they had fallen between Malachi and the time of the New Testament, which was a good 500 years. The things that had changed. Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, zealots, Essenes, all these people rising up in the interim. Further division, further error, further confusion. Everybody trying to find answers for themselves according to their own logic and their own reason. To their feelings. Here we go.
Which is rough and steep, out into the light of the sun in the outside world. It is difficult for his eyes to adjust to the brightness, so that he struggles to see. At first, he can only bear to look down at the shadows and reflections in the water, and later the things themselves. And from these he would go on to contemplate the light of the stars and of the moon. Finally, he would be able to look upon the sun itself. By now he has learned that it is because of the sun that he can see anything at all, that the sun is in some sort the cause of all these things that they had seen. Then,
And what do prophets teach us? What do prophets teach us is the cause of all things? God. We're taught to look at God as the cause of everything. He is our creator. We are his creature, his creation. All things come from God. What we do with them, good and bad, is up to us because that's of our agency. But we will see the true things. What did you see later? What did you see in this video? A real horse, real lakes, real water, real vessels, real trees, not the shadowy image of. We're being taught that we'll be raised up and taught truth.
If he recalled to his mind his first habitation, still chained and deceived in the cave, he would pity the prisoners there. If there had been honours and commendations among them which they bestowed to one another, and prizes for the man who was quickest to make out the shadows as they pass, he would not envy and emulate those who were honoured, but endure anything rather than opine with them and live that.
Think of Paul. Think of Joseph Smith. Think of Isaiah. Once they see truth, the things of the world don't matter. They don't aspire to titles, wealth, riches, fame, fortune. They aspire to bringing their brothers and sisters to the light.
That life. If he were to go down again and take his old place in the cave, he would find it hard to see in the darkness, having come from the bright light. And if he tried to join in evaluating these shadows while his vision was still dim and before his eyes were accustomed to...
Now, remember that. Think of the story of the prophets. They've all, the prophets I mentioned, Moses, Abraham, Enoch, Adam, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Samuel, the 12 apostles, they've all interacted with a higher plane, and they've all seen and heard the voice of God. They have knowledge that no one else does. It's not a complete knowledge into how the world works, but it is a complete knowledge into what God wants for his people at that time. But he's not lifted up. He's not living on that higher plane forever. He's put back down here in the world to try and teach us, to try and break us free of illusion. And this, as Nibley would call it, is the prophet's reward.
To the dark. The shackled prisoners would laugh at him for his inability to see the shadows well, whilst they congratulate each other on their own proficiency. They would say that he had returned from his journey aloft with his eyes ruined, and if he tried to release them and lead them up to the light, they would kill him if it were possible. Plato explained,
think about that. Think about that right there. Does that not sum up the prophet's reward? Let me free you. What, 1-2% follow? The others mock, scorn. And if it gets too against their ideas of the world, if it gets too much into the anti-establishment, anti-political, anti-corporate, anti-whatever you want to call it, message that is pushed by false priests, false teachers, false philosophers, false doctors, they'll push for that man to be murdered, for his death. How many prophets have been put to death?
the meaning of this analogy. He explained that the prisoners are very much like us humans, who are chained or restricted from knowing the truth. The cave represents the empirical world of sense experience.
So let's go back to Doc Covers 123. We move down to verse 12. For there are many yet on the earth among all sects, parties, and denominations who are blinded by the subtle craftiness of men, whereby they lie in wait to deceive, and who are only kept from the truth because they know not where to find it. I went to Denver this weekend, and I dropped my daughter off at a primary activity to go to with her aunt. Her aunt is a year younger than her. And I'm in the parking lot, and I was shocked and dismayed by the number of equal sign stickers, the blue flag with the yellow equal sign issued by the Human Rights Campaign, and the rainbow, the coexist, the Muslims see you get the idea, the T's, the cross, coexist, and we should coexist. But then with that, they'll have a rainbow sticker. I would say I saw equal sign and rainbow stickers on about a fourth of the cars in the parking lot. These people, even in the church, did support these false ideologies. If you're one of those rainbow sticker people, I understand you want to be empathetic. I know we should not work to make these people's lives miserable, but we should not be sustaining those institutions, those practices, or those ideals. All right, let's keep going.
The region revealed through sight. Plato likened the light of the fire in it to the power of the sun, and the shadows symbolize the imperfect particulars we observe. Like shadows, these only resemble reality and lead to opinion rather than to knowledge. The ascent to light and the contemplation of the thing.
So there you go. You get these forms. These are the people in control. This is your elite class, maybe. These are your people who are pushing ideas for profit or for gain or for power. These may be people who are well-intentioned and believe that this is the truth because they're down here, but they know that this is not that and that people are being taught this, but they still do this thinking it's in their best interest because they're misguided. And this is not a real sun, right? This is what people think is the best and brightest light because this is all they know until they're raised to a higher level.
Things above represent the soul's ascent to knowledge via reason, as the outside world represents the realm of the forms, the realm of truth. Plato described it as the conversion of the mind from the twilight of error to the truth.
Now, I agree here. This is the change of the mind. That's another word for repentance, right? Change of mind. But it's not the philosopher who changes our minds. I mean, look at us. In 2,000 years of philosophy, since Christ, in the first couple hundred years, we lost the concept of who God was. In the last 20 years, how much of the population can't define what a woman is? We just had a Supreme Court justice in the United States elected to the Supreme Court. And what's a woman, they asked her. And she, a woman, did not know, could not give a definition, said she would have to consult with biologists and other experts. Yet she understood she was a woman, but you can't define it. It can't be known. That's confusion, and that's philosophy. So this is why I say that's the problem with this video, and that's the problem. This world takes this as philosophers leading us to truth, and it's not. It's prophets.
Climb up into the real world, which we shall call true philosophy. The shadows and reflections viewed in the outside world
True
represent
religion.
the lower forms and objects, and the objects and the heavenly bodies represent the higher forms. The sun represents the form of the good upon which all else is contingent or dependent. Plato expanded on that symbol. Good is to the intellectual faculty what the sun is to that of vision. And if you want to know more about that particular comparison, look back again at the video all about the form of the good and the symbol of the sun. Epistemically, Plato's using the analogy to try and convince us, or to try and help us understand and consider our world as one of illusion and the realm of forms as the realm of truth. It helps us to understand the reaction of the philosopher as he comes closer to truth, and the reaction of those around him who ridicule him and who are unable to accept and value and understand his journey. Through the analogy, we are able to recognise the folly of the opinions that people have about this world being the source of truth, when actually all around us is just illusion. It is also a reminder of the difficulty of journeying and the pain of journeying, of letting go of those opinions and of seeking and grasping the truth.
So we're going to stop this here. But look at this. That is our life today. We live in a world of illusion. We're promised happiness and salvation through materialism, consumerism, through supporting the establishment, through recognizing authority and doing as we're told. And so we're kept divided politically so that we can advance power for some. We are kept divided racially, ethnically, through gender, through orientation, because of prejudices. But these prejudices come from these guys here, carrying their sticks and their symbols, pushing their ideas. And we sit here chained, not knowing that what we're being shown is not real and not important. That's what Nibley was talking about, right? When he's talking about the world versus religion. Too many of the ordinances around the world have some likeness to other ordinances. It's not random. It's not. And why would somebody in Peru or Chile or Mexico come up with ideas of human sacrifice for the same purposes and in the same manners as was done in, say, Egypt or any of these places, or just even animal sacrifice taking the place of and satiating the gods? Too many ordinances are too close to each other in meaning and nature. And I think Nibley's right when he says they have to have come from a single source, but they've been altered or corrupted because the world does that. They pull at the loftier ideals, right? They pull at the real idea of a sun, and they make a pseudo-sun that we think of as light, not knowing that there's greater light. Think about what Abraham wrote. Greater light, greater knowledge, greater happiness. He sought for the priesthood and the right to administer, to help these people here in these chains. Doctrine and Covenants, back to now verse 13. Therefore that we should waste and wear out our lives in bringing to light all the hidden things of darkness, wherein we know them, and they're truly manifest from heaven. These should be then attended to with great earnestness. Let no man count them as small things, for there is much which lieth in futurity pertaining to the saints, which depends upon those things. And here's where he sums it up. This is where the prophet sums it all up. And this is what this man here would agree to as being the highest ideal. You know, brethren, that a very large ship is benefited much by a very small helm in the time of a storm, by being kept workways with the wind and the waves. Therefore, dearly beloved brethren, let us cheerfully do all things that lie in our power, and then may we stand still with the utmost assurance to see the salvation of God and for his arm to be revealed. Prophets introduced godly things. Christ introduced godly things. Certain sacraments were brought in by prophets from the beginning of the world, from Adam on. Christ came and said, these have been good, but now here's better. But things don't stay on a higher plane without the guidance from prophets leading the church and the people. One more from Nibley. This time we're going to move on to the next chapter, chapter 18. Easter and the prophets. There are two aspects of Easter, a formal and a literal, or, one might say, a ritual and a doctrinal. The formal aspect is that which everybody knows so well and to which we all subscribe. We all do certain things at Easter, whatever we may think. The uncritical acceptance of ancient customs has precious little to do with any particular doctrine. The bands and fireworks at a political rally are not an expression of the multitude's irrepressible enthusiasm for the party's principle. Rather, they are the means employed to create a popular enthusiasm with the hopes of transferring some of that emotion to the cause of the party. At the end of the 6th century, missionaries to Britain were impressed and disturbed by the great spring festival of the heathen natives of the island. They asked Gregory the Great what they should do about it, and in a famous letter he replied that they should let the people keep their darling festivities, and while turning the whole thing into a Christian celebration. Let them continue to slaughter their oxen and build their booths of green boughs. Passover? Feast of Tabernacles? Is Gregory's advice. Only let it now be done not for the devil, but in praise of God. For, he writes, it is absolutely certain that it is quite impossible to uproot everything at once from the stubborn minds, since it is necessary for them to aspire by degrees or steps, and not by leaps and bounds. Long before, Constantine the Great had followed the same policy in the East. Christmas, Easter, right? What does Easter have to do with chocolates, flowers, trees budding, flowers bursting forth from the ground? We make equivalencies, but they're not quite true, are they? And in the end, we just say, well, it's the resurrection. This is a renewal of life. Christmas, it's remembering the gift of God's love. Christmas was never about a Christmas tree, about a fat old man in a red suit eating milk and cookies and leaving you presents or stockings. Continuing on page 155. Yet bearing in mind that the old customs were being retained precisely because the people were too stubborn to give them up, there certainly was great danger that the opposite would take place, and the established customs of 1,000 years would prove of greater mass and charge than the new Christian teaching, which, accordingly, would be sucked into the older orbit. This is exactly what happened. Constantine considered as one of his greatest triumphs the Christianizing of the great international festival of Mamre in Palestine. He retained the festival, but he Christianized it thoroughly. Yet a pious Christian lady who visited the celebration just a generation later, reported that while the wonderful rites were in full swing, the Christian veneer had worn off and the whole show had reverted to its primal paganism. At the same time, almost in the same year that this observation was made, John Chrysostom, the bishop of what claimed to be the oldest and greatest church in Christendom, that of Antioch, complained that everybody came to church at Easter and at Easter only, simply because it was the thing to do. For the rest of the year he spoke to empty walls. Even at this early date, the formal aspect of Easter had completely overcome the doctrinal. He goes on to talk about the loss of belief that Christ had a corporal body when he was resurrected, because this was anathema to the Jews and the Greeks. The highest ideal was spiritual. Why would Christ need a body? The body is the essence of corruption. The body is weakness. It is sin. So the arguments to the various sects that adhered to the idea that God was a spirit, even while reading in the scriptures that Jesus had a body, they simply did not believe it. They could not believe it because the teachers and the doctors had done away with that. And they missed the voice of the prophets who spoke with authority. Remember, that's what was new about Jesus. He spoke as one having authority. And because of that authority, he could rebuke the Pharisees, the Sadducees. He could call people to repent. He could perform miracles. These teachers lost that authority. They lost the authority to speak as one who knows. They lost the authority to speak as one who conversed with God. It was rhetoric, it was logic, it was reason, and now it's feels. That's what a prophet's for, is attending to a lost and fallen people. And without a prophet to drag our eyes up from this earthly plane, to keep us from staring at the wall of false images, to take us away from a false sun to something higher and brighter, our minds will never be enlightened. Prophets guide us in gaining revelation and talking to God. Prophets point us to higher levels of thinking. Because when we do so according to their example and their teachings, we do the things of God. And things are kept in check and in their proper place. And we remember and we learn and remember and learn and remember and learn that this world is a temporary place, a school, and that what really matters is the world beyond. It's not the money you make, it's the friendships. It's not the power you gain, it's the love that grows. This world leads us astray. This world devours light, does everything it can to obscure it, to block it, to swallow it up, and keep us from seeing it. And there are too many of our brothers and sisters on this earth who, as the scripture says, are blinded by all sects, parties, and denominations, by the subtle craftiness of men, laying in wait to deceive. Not everybody's seeking truth. Some are happy, some are complacent, and that's tragic. But we waste and wear out our lives in bringing to light all the hidden things of darkness. Brothers and sisters, this is how we're going to end this first video. Prophets are a necessity. Prophets are essential. Prophets fulfill a common function. They may have had different messages to preach at various times, but only in how they preached it and who they preached it to. But the prophets have always taught faith and repentance and to come unto Christ. So for those of you out there that cannot understand or accept prophets, I say this. You want us to try the New Testament. For those of you that are Christian, you want us to try the New Testament. I do. Daily. I love that book. I love its teachings. I love the Christ presented therein. But I invite you to try the Book of Mormon. It is as Christ-centered and focused as is the New Testament. And when you see that, when you feel the spirit of the Book of Mormon work in your heart and in your life, you will know that a prophet was called to bring it forth and to reestablish the church on the earth in these days. There is no explaining Joseph Smith. There is no explaining away Joseph Smith. You don't have to like or agree with everything he did. He did what he did, though, because he was commanded to. Pleasant and unpleasant, and all the prophets have had to do that. So, brothers and sisters, friends, countrymen, Romans, Americans, thank you for listening. I hope you'll give this a run. I'm going to do several more videos on prophets because I do think this is the starting place for inviting people into the church and for defending us. I do think this is where we need to start, is by making people more aware of the mission of the prophets as related to Christ. Prophets don't grant us salvation. But a true prophet, should lead us to Christ and to salvation. So that's it for this video. Thank you. I hope I didn't ramble. I hope I was coherent. I'm a little tired. It's been a long week. Love you all. Peace.